Enter COVID in 2020. If I'm ever going to pull the trigger on setting up this distillery, I need to do it now. We're not making cheap alcohol. We're making very, very nice alcohol that is also very clean. So we're mixing the old style of making gin with these new age botanicals or fruits and flavours, getting those to bind together. And yeah, it's created award-winning gins.
Hey guys, I was checking out our data for the last month and realized that over 90% of the people watching our videos are not yet subscribed. If you've ever found value in our videos or enjoyed the conversations, hit that subscribe button now. It really helps our channel more than you can imagine, and it's the only thing I'll ever ask from you. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Dave, can I call you Dave? Is it David? Yeah, Dave.
Call me Dave, please.
Dave, beautiful. So, well, mate, thanks for joining us on the Next Gen North podcast.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So you've just joined the fledgling, I think we can call it fledgling gin distilling industry in the Territory?
In the Territory, yeah. It is fledgling in the Territory. The gin distilling industry has been going for a while now, Australia-wide. It's a good 15, even 20 years that the gin revolution kicked off.
Sure.
But certainly in the Territory, I think I got my licence equal second.
Wow.
On the same day as Beck Bullen up in Charlie. So yeah.
Why gin? What's the appeal there?
I was making it a little bit as a hobby.
Yep.
And I really enjoyed it. I really wanted to do single malt whiskey because I love single malt.
I'm a big fan as well. What's your favourite?
Lafroig, actually.
Okay, I'm a Glenlivet guy. A little bit fruitier. I'm not that big on my peaty ones just yet.
Yeah.
I think as I get older,
I
reckon they'll get peatier.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's probably why I love Lafroig. I love Lagavulin, Ardbeg, all of the Isla malts. Talisker from Skye as well is really nice.
Top ranker.
But I also like the Macallan and some of the Highland malts as well. So yeah, it sort of varies.
Have you done the whiskey trail?
I haven't. I'm planning on doing it. I was going to do it when COVID hit.
Okay.
And that put the kibosh on that one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think we'll do it.
Yeah, mate, it's fantastic. Like I went there as a broke backpacker.
Yeah.
And I could still manage it. I had to catch a lot of buses. You know, I wasn't doing the minivan picked up from the hotel and all that sort of thing. Like I was walking a lot, and but it was just magic. Like that Scottish high country is absolutely fantastic. But anyway, that's Scotch. This is gin.
It is. But on that, I've got to make sure my holidays line up. And at the moment, the dry season is when it's good over there.
Right.
My holidays are in January and Scotland's not too flash in January.
Yeah, no, it's a bit rough. But
give it a miss.
Keep you warm though, at least the Scotch.
Yeah,
so anyway.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So the gin. So I was doing a bit of gin as a hobby. This was back in 2016, 2017. I went down to Tassie and did a tour of some of the Tasmanian distilleries down there, the whiskey distilleries predominantly.
Excellent.
And just loved it even more and thought, I want to do some formal training and see if I could actually turn this in from a hobby into a side hustle.
Sure. Sorry, just quickly, did you go to Sullivan's Cove?
I did.
Wow.
Yes.
What did you think?
Awesome. I spent 2 days at Sullivan's Cove actually as part of my training. Mm-hmm. So loved it there. Yeah, really, really good distillery and some beautiful whiskey they're making there.
Yeah.
They've won world whiskey twice.
That's right. Well, that's how I came to know it.
Yep.
You know, the $400 bottle, and that was going back some years ago now.
Yeah, I think that was 2018, 19, somewhere around
Sounds
there.
right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, Tassie in general, I've only been there once on all fronts, and I actually went there during COVID, so I was probably a little bit spoilt in the fact that there was no people there, there was no one on the roads. We had all these holiday destinations almost to ourselves.
Yeah.
The produce, the seafood, the cheese, the bread. It didn't matter what it was. It was like I was in, like in the French Riviera or something. It felt
awesome.
Like, it was
it's better. I think it's better than France. I was in France 2 years ago. The food in Australia is better than it is there.
I think you can make the case, right? It's just an amazing bread basket. Like it just was fantastic. But anyway, Sullivan's Cove and your training.
Loved it. And at Lark as well.
Right.
We also went to Nant Distillery, which has got a bit of a checkered past, but that was all over when we went there. To do some of our training there. So that was back in 2018. I then did a whole lot of study offline and got certified through the Institute of Brewers and Distillers in the UK as a distiller. So I got a certificate in distilling cereal, which means whiskey or grain. then I came back home and wrote the business plan for the distillery.
Were you inspired at that point?
I was. So this was 2018, and I wrote
Yeah.
the business plan, and my wife was getting worried and sort of said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Because I was working in government. I had a good job with government. Enter COVID in 2020. I was, at the time, head of fire rescue and emergency services here in the Territory. And 6 months into that, a few different things happened, but penultimately I said, okay, if I'm ever going to pull the trigger on setting up this distillery, I need to do it now.
Sure.
I need 10 years of good sort of hard work in me, and I'd turned 50 at that point.
Right.
I need 10 years to really kick this off and make it work. I need that energy.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife said, she backed me in and said, all right, go for it. So I kicked the sort of corporate world and spent 6 months at home pretty much on the computer, getting everything sorted, getting all my licenses sorted, rented the premise where we are now down in Winnelly.
Yep.
And bought a still. That took about 8 months to get here. And by the time it did, we were ready to go. So in 2021, we actually opened the doors and we sold our first bottle of gin.
Wow.
So we launched with 2 bottles of gin to start with.
Yep.
The still that I bought is a very traditional whiskey still,
Okay.
and therefore we make a very traditional style of gin. So we do a one-shot distillation style of gin, which means all of the ingredients for the recipe go in the pot together with alcohol.
Is that all at the same time?
All at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
It steeps for a day or two, depending on which gin we're making.
Yep.
Then we'll turn the still on. So it'll just be sitting there for 2 days, up to 2 days, with not even turned on.
Yep.
Then we'll turn it on and we'll distill that as a single recipe. What comes out the other end, the only thing we do is water it down to bottling strength. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's traditionally how gin's been made.
Sure.
We don't do any compounding. Compounding is where people distill things one at a time, or the botanicals one at a time, and then mix and match flavours.
Yep.
We don't do that. It's all in the pot together.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's how gin was originally made.
Amazing. So what was your creative process in that regard? You know, you said you started sort of 2016 was it, playing with, or were you even starting before that?
Yeah, I was playing around even before that.
Wow, okay.
But I didn't get certified until that 2018
Okay.
period, and that's when I really started to get serious about it.
Yep.
And initially the distillery, even the business plan, was written as a bit of a side hustle.
Mm-hmm. Is that because you hadn't sort of anticipated COVID and then...
And getting out of government.
Yeah, and sort of having to make that kind of pivot, I should say.
Yep.
Yeah, in such a dramatic sort of way.
Yeah, that's right. So I had that opportunity because I was a free entity in government. I could have moved into another agency. I could have gone somewhere else and done something different. We could have moved out of Darwin and gone somewhere else as well. But I really wanted to give it a crack. And I thought it's more than a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
The way I want to do it is I want to do it right. I want to do it properly. I want to make some really good quality products. We spent 3 months just on the marketing in that initial sort of 8-month period.
Yep.
And the labels and the branding to make sure we got that right.
Mm-hmm.
So we put a hell of a lot of work into it in that first sort of 6 to 8 months before we even opened the doors, which meant that when we did open the doors, we had a premium product straight away.
Yep.
And even in our first year, we were winning awards internationally and nationally.
Wow.
Mainly bronzes and silver medals at that stage. We've refined our recipes since, and last week at the Australian Gin Awards, we won 3 gold medals.
There you go.
So absolutely stoked about that.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, we entered 6 gins across 5 categories. 3 of them won gold, 2 won silver, and 1 won bronze. So there was only, from what I can tell, I could be wrong, but I think we're the only distillery in the country to win 3 golds. There was a couple of distilleries that won 2, and that was Prohibition and Never Never, who were 2 of the real big players in the gin scene. And yeah, we won 3. So
punching
We're
above its weight.
punching well above
the
our
territory as it does.
Absolutely.
So what makes a gin go from a silver medal or a bronze medal to a gold medal? Like what sort of tweaks, without giving away the secrets to the farm?
Yeah, sure.
What's the process?
It's balance. So there's a number of different things that it's judged on. It's aroma, it's clarity, the finish, overall balance and flavour profile. So we've just been tweaking those recipes as we go.
Yep.
And it's finally paid off. So 4 years in, we are punching well above our weight, which is awesome. Yeah. And having a good time doing it too.
Mate, it sounds like it's a dream job, really.
It is, yeah. It's not a dream in the middle of the wet season when you're in the shed that's not air conditioned and it's 39 degrees and you're drinking a litre of water an hour to stay hydrated. But it is still, I still love it.
Yeah.
And I've been really enjoying doing the whiskey as well. So we haven't released that yet.
Okay.
But we have whiskey laid down and our first release will be in January for that. So
is that going to be single malt or would you?
It is a single malt.
Oh,
and
mate.
it's bloody
Speaking
fantastic.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really, really love it. We had a little 20-litre test barrel. I went down to the Barossa a couple of years ago because I knew we were going to start making whiskey and laying it down. There's obviously no Coopers up here in Darwin, so Cooper's someone that makes barrels. So I went and visited a Cooper down at Seppeltsfield Winery in the Barossa. Told him what I wanted to do and he said, look, spend a day with me. We'll make a barrel together and that way I'll teach you how to maintain the barrels as well because there's no one up in Darwin who can maintain them for you. So,
wow.
Went and spent the day with him and we made a 20-litre oak barrel together, which was a recycled barrel, so it was an old dry red barrel.
Right.
We then seasoned it with tawny port. It rolled around in the back of my car because I was on holidays down there for the rest of January and went over to the Kangaroo Island and saw a few things and finally got back to Darwin, tipped the port out and I didn't have any new make whiskey to put in it. So at the time I said, well, let's put some dry gin in it and just see how it goes because I did want to do a barrel-aged gin. And so we did that and it was absolutely beautiful after 3 months. So straight away I ordered a 300-litre hogshead barrel, ex-tawny port barrel from Seppeltsfield, got that up and we put Darwin dry gin in it. Rested it for 3 months. It was absolutely beautiful. So we pulled it out and that's one of the gold medals we won last week.
Well, there you
was
go.
for the port barrel rested gin. So that's gone really well.
Yep.
But at the same time, we've got sherry casks and port casks laying there with single malt in them. So I'm really looking forward to our first launch of Northern Territory's first single malt whiskey.
Are you going to do like a hard launch or like, a big event or anything, or just like sort of introduce it slowly and
I think
see how it goes?
I haven't completely decided.
Okay.
I'm going to be away myself in December for a bit.
Yep.
When I get back, I think we'll start to send out some teasers around the end of January, maybe early February.
Okay. Well, I hope
we'll do a launch party. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How does
now that I know you love whiskey?
mate,
mate.
I love it. I love it so much. And my partner likes a tipple of gin, so
there you go.
We'll be watching
Match made in
the
heaven.
mailbox. Yeah. So in terms of distilling, how does somewhere like Darwin, with the weather we've got, it's obviously brutal here.
Yeah, for
the
sure.
conditions, the elements, all that sort of stuff. How does that play into the whole distilling process, whether it be gin, whiskey, anything else you guys are doing? How does that all factor?
The distilling side of it doesn't affect it too much at all.
Okay.
Just the distilling part. The fermentation for the whiskey, we've got to watch the temp on that. So we do our whiskey in October, November.
Okay.
So we take the still offline from gin and we switch to whiskey for about eight or 9 weeks. During that period, because we're in build-up, everything's getting pretty warm pretty quick. So the fermenter I have is a jacketed fermenter, which means it's double-skinned.
Insulated.
It's insulated, yeah. Well, it's not insulated, it's hollow, but in that hollow is water. Right. So, and I've got a chiller there that I use for the condenser for the still. We run 20-degree water, 23-degree water around the skin of that fermenter to keep the temperature down.
Yep.
So That's just to bring it down for us to pitch the yeast.
Yep.
Once we pitch, I'll keep it down low for about 24 hours and then we'll slowly let it heat up. The fermentation process itself generates heat as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you let it run too quickly, we'll have a big mess for starters because it will foam over the top. But it'll also kill the yeast because it will just get too hot too fast.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have to just be careful how we do the ferment.
Yep.
We're getting pretty good at that now, though. We've done it a lot,
Yep.
so we know what temperatures to put the fermenter at.
Yep.
When.
Yep.
Through the process.
Sure.
Once that's finished, we do the distillation. That's pretty quick. Then it's down to the barrels. So the reason we use 300 litre hogsheads and 100 litre casks is to slow fermentation down. Aging down. Maturation.
Slow it down.
Slow it down.
Interesting.
If it matures too quickly, too much tannin will come out of the wood.
Right.
And potential for a bitter whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Rum is far more forgiving than whiskey, so you can let rum mature quicker.
Is that because of all the sugars in it? Or
exactly.
Just balances out that bitterness. Yeah, sure.
Bitterness doesn't really come through because of the sugars.
Right.
But for whiskey, you just got to be really careful.
Yep.
So to slow it down, we use larger barrels because that way there's less contact with the timber by the spirit. The smaller the barrel, the more contact. So down south, particularly in Tassie, 20 litre, 50 litre casks are really common in the whiskey distilling game.
Right.
The smallest I have is hundreds.
And that's due to the weather.
Due to the weather.
Right.
Due to the heat. Just because that maturation is going to be so fast.
Yep.
So before we actually laid any whiskey down, I had a good chat with the guys at Fiji Rum Co.
Mm-hmm.
Because we actually share the same cooper. The cooper down at Sebelsfield, Andrew Young, is also the cooper for Fiji Rum Co. And he makes regular trips over there and sends barrels over to those guys. Now they're distilling in Fiji in a similar climate, in a similar type of shed to us even as well.
Right.
So they're also getting pretty warm. So I could have a good chat with those guys about the angel share, which is how much you lose each year from evaporation out of the cask, but also maturation and how fast that was happening. And they found through their processes that larger casks were better, even for the rum.
And they were willing to provide that information freely like that because that's really good because not a lot of people are that willing to, excuse the pun, to do that, right? Like, they want to keep their secrets to themselves.
That's it.
So
the distilling world's really good like that.
Okay.
It's a wonderful industry where people are generally very, very helpful and very friendly. Now, there is intellectual property. There's a line there where no one crosses, so you don't ask people about recipes.
Sure.
And really into the nitty-gritty of some processing.
Yep.
Processing botanicals and things like that, about how people do that. But people do everything a little bit differently.
Sure.
So you're sort of falling into that intellectual property line then.
Yep.
So people tend to keep away from it. But overall, people are really friendly. We go to gin festivals. We're going to one this weekend down in St Kilda in Melbourne. We were in Perth 3 weeks ago for one down there. They're 3-day festivals and there's 60 distillers in the room, all trying to sell their wares to punters who have bought a ticket to come in for tastings and to buy bottles. And we all get along really well.
Mm. Well, I guess you all share
really
a passion and...
Yeah, we do.
So that helps. Yeah.
It does help.
Yeah.
It is a competitive industry and it's just getting more competitive all the time.
Yep.
There's 700 distilleries, over 700 now in Australia. We're lucky up here in that we've only got a few. Mm-hmm. But down in places like South Australia, they've got well over 60 or 70 distilleries down there.
Yeah.
Tassie's the same. Victoria's catching up real quick as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of gin, what is it that aligns so well with the territory? Like, is it just that, maybe not the territory broadly, but maybe the top end, if you're drinking gin during the dry season, is it that sort of sunset, gin with a slice of cucumber or whatever, however you like it? Yep. What is it that aligns with the territory that you've found?
Yeah, absolutely. Just exactly what you said. Yep. So when I've always thought about gin, way before I started this, I've always thought of those African movies with or Indian movies with people sitting in places like, or even in Singapore, sitting in Raffles Hotel.
Like the Bombay Sapphire.
Having a gin tonic.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was just that traditional drink.
Yep.
And the GT was around because tonic has the quinine in it.
Yeah.
The quinine was good for to keep the malaria away,
Right.
and the mozzies away.
Yeah.
So that's why people were
So it was
drinking it.
medicinal.
Yeah, it was medicinal, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think people think that that drink is synonymous with the tropics,
Right.
and it does go great up here.
Yeah.
And we try and make gins that work in our climate as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, the Darwin Festival gin, the one that's got the pink label, it's a little bit different to our other labels because the label's done by the Darwin Festival. So we do that in partnership with them.
Mm-hmm.
The flavours in that gin is native finger lime and grapefruit.
Right.
The whole idea of that gin was to make one that was really easy to drink on a hot August night for the festival.
Yep.
So, and it's worked really, really well. So just those lovely tropical flavours, you put a light tonic with that, and it's just easier to have more than one.
Yep.
It's very hard to have one.
I'll bet.
Generally, people will have a couple of them
Yep.
before they go into a show, which is absolutely perfect. And that was the brief, essentially, from the Darwin Festival.
Mm-hmm.
That was what they were after. And that recipe now is pretty much the Darwin Festival's recipe because I haven't marketed it as any other gin. It's only marketed under the Darwin Festival label.
Yep.
And it's going really well, and Territorians have been loving it.
Fantastic. So in terms of your creative process, I think the question I was trying to ask before was, how do you come up with your own recipes? You know, what's your creative process in terms of, do you make gins that you want to drink, or do you make gins that you think will sell well? You know, what's the distinction there for you between, you know, trying to run a successful business and, you know, maybe a passion project and trying to make those things sort of mesh together somehow? Yeah.
It's a bit of both. So absolutely it's gins I wanted to drink. Our first release was Darwin Dry Gin. That was my favourite gin that I'd already started making. So much so that our Navy Strength gin is a Navy Strength version of our Darwin Dry Gin.
Right.
Navy Strength means it's 58% ABV. And the reason we do that is we can pack a whole lot more flavour in there.
Is that right?
Yep.
So the higher proof, I think, is that proof? Yep. The more flavour you can concentrate. Yep.
Yeah, and still have a clear product in the bottle.
Right.
So if we were to water that particular gin down to 40%, it'd be cloudy, opaque in the bottle because the oils will start to drop out of solution.
Wow.
The oils that come from the botanicals that are in there.
So there's a fair bit of science that goes into it as well.
There is, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So the Darwin Dry was my favourite gin. I then wanted to make a version of that was more citrus forward and made to drink with tonic, and that's when Desert Lime came along. So, and Desert Lime's our biggest selling gin still. It's a massive favourite up here in the Territory. A lot of locals really love it.
Yep.
And it does go great with tonic.
Yep.
So it's a really nice, refreshing GT in the afternoons for people to enjoy.
Yeah.
Then we sort of went sideways a bit and went, okay, so let's really drill down on some of these local botanicals and indigenous botanicals and see what we can do here. So Kakadu plum and Guangdong.
Yep.
Let's push those two together and see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
I nearly threw that recipe out. I do all my testing in a small, it's a 30-litre Portuguese alembic pot still. It's a handmade little still from Portugal. It's a 30-litre. I only ever do 10-litre runs in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I make sure the recipe's good in that before we transition across to the big still, which is a 600-litre still.
Is there any flavour change? Because that sounds quite a unique still.
Yeah.
So when you jump from that, say, 10-litre batch to the bigger ones, how do you sort of make sure that...
It's pretty much a numbers game.
Right.
And the flavour only improves with the bigger still.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's difficult for me to suspend things above the wash in the small still. Mm-hmm. Everything goes in there, including if we've got any fruit or peel or anything like that. Normally we'd suspend that above the wash in the other still. We can't do that in the small still. So everything goes in, which means it can get overcooked pretty quick.
Right.
But yeah, the Kakadu plum and Kwandong, we did 23 recipe tests on that before we finally got it right.
Yeah.
And it was doing my head in. I was ready to throw in the towel and go, nah, this is too hard. Even now, trying to get flavour out of Kakadu plum is actually really hard.
Right.
When you're distilling.
Yep.
But it does come through, but it's a subtle taste.
Yep.
Whereas the Kwandong's a wild peach, it's nice and sweet, comes through on the front of the palate pretty well. So they were our first 3 releases. I do love them all, but I love them for different reasons. And the public, different people will like, they've got different palates. Everyone's got a different palate.
Sure.
We do 7 different gins now so that we can hopefully have something for each and every palate that's out there.
Yep.
Someone will find something that they can enjoy. That's all we're looking for.
Yep.
We've stopped at 7 for now.
Okay.
I've made a conscious decision not to put out any more gins. I think we've got a pretty good sort of cross-section of gin that will go to discerning palates, but different discerning palates.
Mm-hmm.
So some people like the dry, some like the citrus forward, some like something a bit spicier, some like the navy. And then you've got the whiskey drinkers that sort of are introing into gin and they go for the port barrel rested gin.
Yeah, that's probably me, I reckon. That's where I
Yep.
fit, I think.
Yeah.
Because like I don't really know what the difference is between, say, a botanical and just maybe an ingredient. Like
Yep.
I just haven't investigated what the difference is.
Yeah, well,
are you
just-
able to just maybe for someone like
Yeah,
me
for
that's
sure.
not well versed in that?
Botanical just means it's come from a plant.
Right.
Pretty much, I can't think of anything that we put in the still that hasn't come from a plant.
Okay. Right.
So they're all botanicals, really. I guess if you sort of singled some things out as botanicals and other things out as fruit
Right.
or flowers.
So I think when I think of botanical, I'm sort of maybe drawn more to like bouquet, like
Yeah.
an essence or something like that, as opposed to like, say, a peppercorn.
or a spice.
That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure.
Yep.
So yeah, herbs, spices, we use them all.
Yep.
Juniper berry, not a berry at all. It's actually a bit piney. It's got
Okay.
a menthol flavour to it. We use those. We use coriander seeds. We use cassia bark, which is commonly known as cinnamon, but the Australian version's cassia bark.
Right.
Things like star anise that we use in the Darwin Dry and the Desert Lime has a really strong licorice flavour to it.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of different things out there that we use that are sort of those traditional spices and traditional London dry botanicals. And there's even things there like angelica root that we use, which helps bind flavours together.
Sure.
But then we use desert limes and Kakadu plums and Kwandong. So we're mixing the old style of making gin with these new age botanicals or fruits and flavours and getting those to bind together.
Yep.
And it's created award-winning gins. So
Yeah. So from my understanding, the traditional, I guess, key ingredient is juniper, right?
that's right.
Do we have native juniper?
We do.
Is that conducive to making gin in Australia, or do you use an imported juniper? What's your process?
I use ingredients that are the best I can get my hands on.
Okay.
Best juniper in the world, generally, depending on seasons, of course, comes from Macedonia, and that's where I get my juniper from.
Wow.
The coriander I use actually comes from India. The star anise I use comes from Southeast Asia. The cassia bark comes from Australia. The nutmeg comes from Australia.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of spices that aren't grown in Australia, or if they are, they're not grown a lot,
Yeah.
mainly because the margins on those might be quite low.
Yeah.
Because so much of it's grown in places like India and Southeast Asia.
Yeah. I imagine your freight
a lot more
costs
cheaply.
must be staggering.
I generally go through a middleman, so it's
Okay.
not that bad.
You don't wear too much of that
Yeah.
cost. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Your question around juniper, though, yeah, there is native juniper in Australia, and there are farmers in Australia now trying to grow juniper, good juniper here
Yep.
in Australia. No one's really nailed it yet
Okay.
that I know of.
Sure.
If someone's listening and has,
Yeah.
let me know.
Good luck.
Be great to use some
Yeah.
good Australian juniper. There are a few distilleries out there that are growing their own or using their own juniper. Kangaroo Island Spirits down on KI have grown their own juniper. So I haven't actually tasted the gin that they've made from that, but I know they released one about 3 or 4 months ago. So
Right.
I'm interested to taste that and see how it goes.
Yep.
Yeah, but you're right. The key ingredient and the ingredient you use the most in making gin is juniper or should be juniper.
Right.
There's a lot of people in Australia that are making gin without juniper in it.
Is that gin?
Depends who you ask.
Okay.
So in Australia, legally, the only legal definition of gin is it must taste like gin.
Right.
So that leaves it pretty open to put
Subjective.
in whatever you want.
Yep.
Considering there's also hundreds of distilleries out there in Australia making gin, and many of them not using juniper. So it's a very, very broad category now here in Australia. I follow all of the rules that the EU has in place, particularly around London dry gin. So there's some fairly specific things you have to do to make a London dry gin. It's that one-shot distillation that I mentioned before. It's got to be higher than 37.5%. I think it is, or 36.5%. I think it's 37.5%. The only thing you're allowed to add to it after distillation is water. So all those types of things I actually carry through to all the gins that we make. The 2 gins that we produce that are coloured, one is Rosella and the other is the port barrel rested gin. That means something's happened after distillation because colours don't go over the still. The Rosella gin, we've steeped Rosellas on our Darwin dry gin for a month and then we've added sugar. So there's a colour to that one from the Rosella. The port barrel rested gin, it's been in a barrel for 3 months. It's got that lovely whiskey look to it, and that's all come from the barrel. So it's from the port coming out of the back out of the barrel and the oak.
Yeah.
So all the rest of our gins are clear.
Yep. Because I always wondered, I'm a beer drinker as well. I pretty much probably drink anything that's alcoholic, but native millets, native Australian millets. I thought, gee, there's got to be, if no one's already doing it, there's got to be massive opportunity there to brew beer with Australian millets, native millets, because people are looking for that, aren't they? Like with the things that you're doing, getting native ingredients and the highest quality ingredients you can to make the best quality product. It seems like people are just calling out for that like authenticity, that quality. It's just always something that just comes to my mind, like, geez, there's got to be massive opportunity there. And do you sort of see these type of industries, whether it's brewing or distilling, as just going in that kind of direction?
Absolutely. Distilling certainly has already. There's a hell of a lot of people in Australia using Australian botanicals. Now, I wanted to make sure that we didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, hence why I use a lot of those traditional botanicals still in the gin.
Yep.
But I'm adding in some of those Australian botanicals, and there's a lot of them, things like lemon myrtle, the Kakadu plum and the Guangdongs that we're using. There's some great locally grown citrus, like grapefruit, limes. The limes up here are fabulous. So using all of those things, and even some of the leaves from some of the trees up here, using those things in the gin with the traditional botanicals that have been used for a couple of 100 years and are known to work, just helps, I think, create a product that has got a bit of diversity to it because of those indigenous botanicals, Australian indigenous botanicals, but also there's some traditional sort of methods there as well that speak to someone's palate who may have just been drinking those traditional styles of gin.
Yep.
But now this is just, it's not too much of a departure from what they're used to.
Sure.
And it's working.
Yep.
So,
Great. So you mentioned before you've done some collaborations, say, with the Darwin Festival.
Yep.
Is there any other collaborations you've done that you could tell us a bit about?
Yeah. I've done a couple of contract jobs for sort of corporate type jobs where they wanted their own label.
Okay.
I've done a couple for the military. One was for the Australian Intelligence Corps.
Wow.
So I did a gin for them and sent
As
that
in
over to
like
Queensland.
a bespoke gin?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing.
And did another one for local, one CSR, one Combat Signals Regiment out at Robbo.
Yep.
They wanted one as well. They only wanted 70 bottles, so they used an existing recipe. But we labelled it up with their own label and had a lot of fun with that, actually.
Awesome.
So I really like doing those.
Yep.
They're fun, and whoever we're doing it for, they have to do the label. So we give up all the specs. They then throw back a PDF to us, and we do all the printing and everything from there. But they have a bit of fun with it because they get to make their own label as well. And
Yeah, great.
yeah.
But what about other, say, not necessarily drinks? Do you give your ingredients to other people to make new foods with, or mix two type of different things with? No,
No, not at this stage. No.
Okay, because I'm sure I thought I read somewhere about a sorbet or something that someone had used your gin or flavour profile or something to make definitely a new thing. Yeah.
So John Hall down at Trampoline.
Yes, that's what it was.
Down at the waterfront?
Yes.
Yeah, he made a Darwin Festival sorbet, which I think the festival marketed as simply the zest.
Yes.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're selling it at the distillery as well. So if you can't get it down at Trampoline, come into the distillery and you can have a little cup of sorbet there.
Great.
Because I'm buying that back off John. So we give him the Darwin Festival gin. He makes a lemon sorbet with the gin in it.
Yeah.
And the flavours of the gin just come through beautifully. It's really,
awesome.
really tasty. The other company or business that we're working with is Bumblebean Chocolates in Stuart Park.
Yep.
So Leo Cleanthos and his team there, we've been working with them now for a few months, and he uses our drinks to make chocolates.
Yep.
So he makes ganache with the alcohol in there. So he uses our coffee liqueur. We do an awesome coffee liqueur that's actually in one of those oak barrels I was talking about. It's an export barrel, and it's now a Solera barrel. So, which means a Solera barrel is one you never let empty. So once it gets half empty, we do another batch of coffee liqueur and refill it.
Why is that?
So the complexity of the barrel just keeps building and building and building.
So it gets better.
And it gets better and better. So it keeps coming through thicker and stronger into the coffee liqueur.
Right.
And coffee liqueur is such a strong drink anyway because it's got coffee in there. To impart good flavour from the barrel, doing it as a Solera barrel is actually working really well. So we've got that wonderful oak complexity coming through now into the coffee liqueur after a few months. So he's putting that into a chocolate. He's done our Rosella liqueur. We do a Rosella liqueur as well, which is wonderful with lemonade or in a margarita or even in a spritz instead of Aperol. Just use the Rosella.
Yep.
And he's put that into a chocolate, the Rosella liqueur chocolate, which is lovely. The Darwin Festival gin, he's done one with that as well. Desert Lime gin, he's done a chocolate with that. And the Port Barrel Rested gin, he did that one in a chocolate, a dark chocolate, and it's absolutely beautiful. That's my favourite of the lot.
Yeah, nice. So do you guys serve food at your distillery?
We've only got a kitchenette.
Okay.
Because it's literally a shed.
Yep.
So warehouse style, there's a small retail space at the front that we've turned into a cocktail bar.
Yep.
There's some bathrooms and office, and in between there's a kitchenette.
Okay.
So we can't do much cooking.
Yep.
We do toasties and cheese boards.
Okay.
So cold cheese boards.
Yep.
We do those up.
Because I was going to ask, what in terms of the food pairing with the gin, do you have
Yep.
any sort of really go-to recommendations about the specific products you guys do with what people should maybe eat it with or drink it with as well?
Yeah, cheese is always great. Having a cheese board and charcuterie as well, cheese and charcuterie with gin is always good.
Sure.
We've done a few dinners around too where we've worked with chefs and paired food with gins.
Yep.
So I've done a couple at the Hilton, one just down at the other end of the arcade here with Last Supper. Done a couple with those guys. And they're a lot of fun too. So I'll talk about the gins, the chef will talk about the food, and everyone gets a nice experience out of it. So
great.
They end up being a lot of fun.
Shout out to the Last Supper. They're a good bunch of guys.
They
down
are,
there.
yeah. Bright and Monica down there are great.
Yeah, they're cool. In terms of non-alcoholic drinks, do you do any non-alcoholic stuff there?
Not yet, other than a couple of sodas.
Okay.
So because we've got the cocktail bar, we make our own syrups for that. So we'll do things like lemon aspen syrup or Muntries, which is emu apple.
Okay.
Make an emu apple syrup that we'll use in the cocktails.
Yep.
We can also mix that with soda water to make essentially a soft drink.
Like a house-made soda, is there?
House-made soda, yeah. So we don't can it or bottle it. You can only get it over the bar at the distillery, but certainly there's always non-alcoholic options over the bar.
Yep.
And we also make sure that we've got a couple of mocktails, or at least one mocktail on hand as well.
Great. What does nil Durum Valenti mean?
Yep.
What's the inspiration behind it?
Nothing is difficult for the willing.
Okay, I like
So
it.
it's a play on our surname. Willing's obviously my surname.
Sure.
When I looked up the family history, our family motto was strength from above when you translated it from Latin, and I thought, no, that's too wanky to put on the wall.
It's very strong.
It's very strong. I thought, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I figured just had to play around, and nothing is difficult for the willing.
Yeah. And what about the goat as well?
The goat?
Yeah.
So the goat's out on our family crest.
Okay, cool.
So the willing family originally comes from Loddeswell in Cornwall,
Right.
in the UK.
I think some of my family comes from Cornwall as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So Cornish Celts, if you go back far enough.
Yeah, cool.
Dad did a whole lot of family treeing. I don't know, is that a word? I think so.
It can be for today.
And that's where we're from. So the goat was in the centre of the crest. I normally wear a signet ring, but at the moment it's getting fixed. And my sons both wear a signet ring with the goat's head on it. So the goat head was always going to be in the crest.
Just ties it all together.
It does, but the rest of my family sort of said, Willing Distillery, you got the goat on there. Don't stuff this up.
Yeah, he's got too much invested in this. So
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that there was a bit of maybe a sliding doors moment where you maybe could have gone elsewhere, Sydney, Melbourne, whatever. That might have had better infrastructure, better gin scenes that you could just sort of plug into, supply chains, you name it.
Yep.
So why Darwin?
Definitely supply chains.
Yep.
The freight is a bit of a killer, and the weight. It's not just the freight; it's also the weight for things to get here.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge. Not having other distilleries up here to work with was also a challenge. I couldn't just bounce off mates. But I love Darwin.
Yep.
When we were doing the marketing for the distillery, we couldn't work out what to put on the front label. We knew that Willing Distillery was going to be on there. We knew the name of the drink was going to be on there. But what was going to be the hero? And it took 3 months for us to land on Made in Darwin.
Right.
Because we kept going back there. We kept going back to being proudly Territorian, to loving where we live and loving this place. So it just fit. Made in Darwin needs to be on the label.
Yeah.
So that's there, big and bold in the middle.
Yeah.
My wife is born and bred Territorian. She's lived here all her life. Her parents still live in the house that she grew up in Tiwi, here in Darwin. Both her brothers are still here with their families as well. So
And that survived Tracy, that house, did it?
No, it didn't. They lost their house in Tracy.
Oh, wow.
And
then rebuilt.
Nearly lost themselves as well. They did have to they moved to Brisbane for a year.
Yep.
And then came back and bought one of the bunkers in Tiwi.
Wow, there you go.
They didn't go elevated again. They bought one of the
Yep.
low-level bunkers over in Tiwi. But, and they've been there ever since.
Yep.
So I've been in the Territory 24 years. I did 7 years down in Alice Springs, 3 years over in Nhulunbuy, and the rest of the time I've been here since 2010.
Yeah, nice. So you've lived sort of not just in Darwin, which a lot of people tend to do. Like my mum was born in Tennant Creek, so I was born in Darwin, but I lived in Tennant for 8 years. So I've sort of, moved and lived in various places sort of along the Stuart Highway.
It's good to do that. It's a good experience. I had young kids too when I was down in Alice.
Yep.
And the boys loved growing up down there. It was fantastic for them.
I love Tennant. It cops a lot of heat now for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But in terms of a place in the 90s anyway, for a kid to grow up with, we didn't, want for anything down there. Like we had the place to ourselves, and it was just our sport was really strong.
Yep.
Like we didn't always beat Alice Springs, but we were always competitive, if nothing else, with Alice. So again, it's that punching above your weight sort of thing that a lot of people seem to do in the Territory.
Yep.
But it also gave you a lot of perspective about, living in a pretty tough place with, a lot of social problems and that sort of thing. But it also gave you a good sense of the true characters and the spirit of the Territory, living in places like that.
Yeah,
so,
it did.
Character building.
Absolutely. Well, I did my 7 years in Tennant, and I was working for the federal government at the time, and they said, you've got to go back to Canberra, you've gone feral. So I said, okay, no worries. So I moved back to Canberra.
Right.
And about 6 months later, I said, yeah, you're right, I've gone feral. I've got to go back to the Territory.
Got to go back to my people.
So I applied for Northern Territory government jobs, and that's when I landed the job in Nhulunbuy. So
yeah, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the Territory business operating environment for a sort of a burgeoning new business like yours? Is it pro-business you find the Territory, or is there some barriers that we need to work on? How are you sort of seeing things at the moment?
It's a good question. At the moment, I think Australia-wide, small business is suffering. It's doing it tough,
Yep.
particularly if you're relying on retail. People don't have as much disposable income in their pocket as they did a couple of years ago.
Sure.
Certainly during COVID. So everyone's feeling that. And distilleries and craft breweries around the country are feeling it the same as everybody, and there's a lot of them that are going under. So
I wanted to talk to you about that, but
particularly breweries.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Is
a
that
few
due to
distilleries falling over too, but mainly breweries are.
Is that due to the excise, or is
Yes.
that due in part to the excise? I
In
should say.
part to the excise.
Yeah.
A lot of breweries were offered by the Commonwealth government during COVID. They were offered to forego their excise tax payment while COVID was on.
Okay.
A couple of years on, the ATOs come calling and said, okay, you've got to pay up
amortisation.
that bill from
Sure.
you've had that now for a couple of years. When the ATO says pay up or else, you don't really have much choice.
No.
So that's pushed a few of the breweries over.
Yep.
They just haven't been able to survive it.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate. Distilleries generally don't have as big a loan upfront set up
Okay.
as a brewery does.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of breweries.
What's the distinction there?
All the brewing equipment.
Is it a more complicated process brewing beer than is it complication or is it scale?
No, it's scale.
Okay.
So the number of fermenters you need and the equipment that you need to make a number of different beers
Yep.
is a lot harder than having one still
Yep.
and maybe a couple of fermenters that you use if you're making your own neutral spirit or whiskey or rum.
Okay.
So that upfront cost for a brewery it's probably starts at around $500,000 now.
Right.
Whereas a distillery you can probably get away for $250,000 to $300,000.
Yep.
Or if you just want to do small batch as a side hustle and you're only after a 200 litre still, you could probably start up for less than 200K.
Right. And is that so? In terms of the beer brewing,
Yep.
500K, is that considered like a microbrewery still?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah, for
staggering
sure.
numbers. Like when you look at the bigger players and how they can sort of operate, at scale, they've got economies of scale, so they can sort of wear a lot of those government excises like we're talking about.
That's right. Yeah. And it's hard if you're a craft brewery or microbrewery. It's hard for you to compete.
Yep.
And most of them don't try. So they don't try to compete with Great Northern.
Sure.
And it's a different market.
Forex Golden. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So are you competing on flavour then? Like it's you're trying to find your niche and just mine that to an extent instead of just like this
That's it.
huge.
Make something that's really good
Yep.
that people really enjoy, and hopefully it will grow. Hopefully more and more people will enjoy it
Yeah.
and continue to enjoy it. And that's where some of those breweries, say over in WA from 20 years ago, like that were making beers like Redback, if anyone remembers that one.
I remember that. Yep.
That got Australia-wide. That was huge.
Yep.
Now you've got breweries like Little Creatures, but they're all being bought up. So once they get to that stage, the big guys buy them up. So you've got Lion, Asahi, they buy those breweries up
Yep.
and they're no longer independent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same happens with distilleries. We've seen that in Australia as well. So Four Pillars is now owned by Lion. Asahi just bought Never Never. So they were probably the two biggest distilleries in the country in recent years, and they've both been sold in the last 2 years.
So does that mean we're sort of concentrating, power in the hands of a few? What is it? Is it oligarchy? Is that the correct terminology? Is that sort of where we're heading in that regard with distilling and brewing and all these sort of craft beverages?
I don't think so. I think there's still a space for craft brewers, craft distillers,
Yep.
to still make a buck out of it, to still enjoy it. And there's always going to be new people coming in to the market as well. I don't think that. I think once you get to a certain size, then you become competitive to because of your scale. You then start to compete with some of the imported products, some of the larger scale products.
And then it becomes like a price thing and
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's easier to buy them out.
Right.
And take that profit for yourself, I guess, is probably in the mind of groups like Lion and Asahi, even Spirit Platform, who I think have just picked up Lark Distillery down in Tassie. So, or they're working with them. I'm not quite sure on the deal there, but yeah.
Well, it's fascinating because the way I read the federal government's excise is it applies more to the higher ABV. What's that? The alcohol by volume. So like for someone like yourself who does, say gin starts at 37, but you were talking about a 58%er as well. Like I would have thought, geez, that's got to hit you guys in the pocket hard.
It does. And that's why the 58% Navy strength is $105 a bottle.
Right.
Because the excise on 1 litre of pure alcohol is now at $1. I think it works out to $1.08 we're up to now.
Okay.
So
it's serious.
It's serious.
Yeah.
We're the third highest excised country in the world.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Behind, I think, a couple of the Nordic countries like Iceland and Finland or something. Yeah.
I mean, Australia's taxed to hell in many respects, but I can't believe what's happened to the schooner of beer over like the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And from what I understand is this excise goes up on a 6-monthly basis. Is that right? In accordance with CPI?
Yeah.
Like how does that affect you as a business owner? Does that mean you're probably doing it more than this, but does that mean at a minimum every 6 months you have to adjust prices, you have to adjust wages, you have to just basically assess all your costs on a much
every 6
more...
months.
Yeah, that's right. At the minimum almost, right?
It goes up. It goes up every 6 months. They say by CPI. Mm-hmm. It's never not gone up.
Yeah.
I can't see them making it go down if we have negative CPI.
Yep.
Well,
so there's nothing more permanent than a temporary, government program. Isn't that the old adage? Like
exactly. Yeah. And we get taxed a lot harder and heavier than the wine industry and the beer industry as well by volume. But because my business is reasonably new, we're only 4 years old, our processes have been refined over that 4-year period. So even though we have had excise rises throughout, I've been able to find that from within because we've refined our processes and got better at it.
Yep.
So I haven't had to up our prices. We've actually got the same price today as we had when we first opened.
Wow, that's amazing.
On our gins.
Because I don't think there would be many places, doesn't matter whether it's in the distilling industry or what, there wouldn't be many businesses. I know my business prices have gone up every single year.
Yeah.
Yep, without fail since, because I basically started, I've got a small market stall at Mindle Beach.
Yep.
Just selling food, and we've had to increase prices every year since 2021.
Yeah, for sure.
To just keep up with inflation.
Yeah, well, everything's gone up a lot with inflation. We feel it the most with freight and our botanicals. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most hikes that we've seen.
Yeah,
freight especially.
Has that impacted on alcohol consumption trends? It feels like to me, teenagers in particular are more discerning about their health than they were before. I mean, in some respects it's worse because they're vaping and all these sorts of things. But it seems like I hear the occasional report that alcohol consumption has gone down. I don't know how much truth there is to any of those statistics. As someone that's at the coalface, how do you sort of see those trends as they currently stand? How do you sort of maybe see them going forward?
I think overall people are drinking less in Australia than they did, say, 10 years ago.
Right.
But people are more discerning than they were 10 years ago too. So they do care about what they're putting in their bodies. Mm-hmm. They'll still go to Bali though and get tattooed, which you sort of think, there's something wrong here.
There's some broken logic there.
What's in that
ink?
But so people are watching what they drink.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very happy to say that because we do use really good produce
Yeah.
and an excellent clean base, we're not making cheap alcohol. We're making very, very nice alcohol
Yeah.
that is also very clean.
And people tend not to abuse that type of alcohol,
No, they
right?
don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's more expensive.
That's right.
Every now and again they will, but generally, I mentioned we've got a cocktail bar at the distillery. We've never had to. There's been once where I had to throw someone out. One time.
Really?
That's it. We've never had the cops called there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a place where people will just go to get trashed.
Yeah.
People go there to really savour the spirits that we make.
Yeah.
And the cocktails that we make. So, it is a different type of clientele. But what I mentioned before about Australian economy being hurting at the moment and everyone feeling it in their hip pocket, that discretionary spending is nowhere near what it was, say, just after COVID, where people were particularly on the East Coast, they were stuck in their homes. They weren't spending much money. If they were just online shopping. So then they went on holidays as soon as they could. A lot of them came up to the Territory, and we had a great year that year. But I don't know if we'll ever get back to those type of numbers. It'd be nice if we did. But that discretionary spending at the moment is people are really a lot more careful. Where they used to buy 2 or 3 bottles, they might just buy 1 now.
Yeah. That said, do you see the Territory and maybe Australia more broadly as the place where you'll continue to see more microbreweries, micro distilleries? Maybe Darwin in particular. Do you see Darwin as the place where the scene is going to grow, and not just because it's such a small scene at the moment?
Yeah.
But is it the right operating environment or the right geographical conditions, that type of thing? Do you see it?
Yeah, geography. It depends on what you're going to make. Geography has a part in it. The weather has a part in it. The biggest challenges, though, that we've got here is your freight, your supply chains that you mentioned earlier. They're long and they're expensive.
Yep.
So there's no bottle manufacturer up here. You've got to ship the bottles in from down south, and the corks. I used to have to get the labels done down south too. There's now after our first year, there was a local provider who upgraded their printer.
Right.
And I now get the labels done locally, which is great.
Great.
But there's a whole lot of stuff that I just cannot get locally.
Yep.
I've got to get it from down south. So there's a lot of freight cost. So when you look at the numbers, should I do it here or should I do it in the Adelaide Hills or on the fringes of Melbourne or in the industrial area in Sydney?
Yeah.
All of those options are better financially.
Yep.
But you're also competing with a busier local market.
That's right.
So, swings and roundabouts there a little bit.
And in Darwin, I guess you're the first mover, right? Like, if you can really establish a foothold here, capture that market, and then maybe you can expand to a Sydney or Melbourne or an Adelaide Hills, right? Longer term. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
We've just had an election.
Yep.
A change of government. What does, in your mind, that look like for the future of the distilling sector in the Territory? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? And what does the gin distilling sector want from a new government?
The biggest thing that I think the distilling industry Australia-wide wants is to at least put a hold on increases on excise tax. That's the number one thing that the distilling industry is calling for, and it's been calling for years, is don't drop it, just freeze it.
Sure.
Stop increasing it every year. Just freeze it where it is now.
Give us some breathing room.
Give us some breathing space and let us employ more people that way. It will actually improve employment. There's a whole lot of pluses that come out of it.
Yep.
So the one person who can make that decision is the treasurer, the Australian treasurer, though.
Okay.
And so far, he has not been keen to entertain doing that.
Yep.
We've got the Australian Distilling Association, which is the Australian-wide one. They're always in Canberra and always in the face of government officials and ministers of industry, but they just haven't been able to get in front of the Treasurer and really get the Treasurer to understand what the impact of this is at this stage.
Is that because you think the economic situation, I guess, federally is starting to come undone? You know, like the interest rates are looking probably more like they're going to go up than go down. You know, Jim Chalmers has a lot on his plate, I imagine.
Yep.
Is that you think part of the reason why maybe that hasn't been considered, as well as, you know, the fuel excise? We pay an insane fuel excise in this country as well.
That's right.
So is it a sort of a variety of factors you think that the relaxation of the alcohol excise maybe hasn't been considered?
But possibly. I don't know. I don't know why, because he won't even talk about it publicly.
Right.
So we really don't know what's going on in his head around this.
Yeah.
We've had support from both sides of government, Labor and Liberal ministers, local members, all over the country to do something.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, Jim Chalmers won't talk about it. So there's not much we can do about that.
All
and
right.
when it comes to locally here, just continue to support small business.
Yep.
Whether it's Labor or Liberal, keep doing it. We're really keen to grow the territory and to be a part of that growth, and to continue to be proud of where we live. We are proudly Territorian. Our label has Made in Darwin on it. When we go to those gin festivals down south, we're promoting Darwin as well.
Yep.
And people come up to us because we've got a big banner, 3 metre wide banner behind us that's got a beautiful overhead photo of the Darwin waterfront. And people say, "Oh, I love Darwin. I was up there 2 years ago, or I was up there during COVID, or I want to come to Darwin." And yeah, we sort of become pseudo ambassadors when we're at these festivals for the top end and tourism and trying to get people up here.
Awesome,
So,
mate.
yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good note to finish on, to be honest. The pro territory, pro Darwin, pro whatever, you know, we've got going on here. So,
Yep.
Dave, awesome, mate. Thanks for coming in. How can people
Stuart.
support what you guys are doing? Is it a website? Is it Instagram? Have at it.
Yeah, both.
Yep.
We've got Insta and Facebook. Please search us up on both of those and like us on there. We've also got an online website. So if someone's thinking, "Oh, I might buy a bottle of gin for someone down south, a relative, their mum, whatever,"
Yep.
you can go online, you can buy it, and you can have that. We'll send it to her for you anywhere in Australia. So, our online store's doing really well as well. That's probably the best way that people can help. Otherwise, come into the distillery, have a great cocktail. Friday, Saturday nights, we do music as well.
Yep.
So we support local artists. They'll come in and, have a toasty and a chilled out atmosphere and awesome cocktails.
Beautiful. Dave
Yeah.
Willing, thanks for your time, mate. Really appreciate it, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks, Stuart. Much appreciated, mate.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.